Maria woke up before the sun rose every morning. The alarm clock beside her small bed rang at 5 o'clock sharp, and she quickly got ready for another long day of work. She lived in a tiny room at the back of a huge mansion that belonged to the Harrison family, one of the richest families in the entire city. The Harrisons owned a big business that made them millions of dollars every year. They had fancy cars, expensive paintings on the walls, and rooms filled with things that Maria could only dream of owning. Maria had worked for the Harrison family for almost 3 years now. She cleaned their floors, washed their clothes, cooked their meals, and made sure everything in the mansion stayed perfect. She was a quiet woman who kept to herself most of the time. She never complained about the hard work or the long hours. She needed this job badly because she had her own family to support back in her small hometown. The mansion was enormous. It had 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a huge kitchen, a dining room that could fit 20 people, and a living room with a fireplace that was bigger than Maria's entire room. There was also a beautiful garden outside with flowers of every color, a swimming pool that sparkled in the sunlight, and a garage that held 5 expensive cars, including a bright yellow Lamborghini that Mr. Harrison loved more than anything else every morning. Maria started her work in the kitchen. She prepared breakfast for the family, usually fresh fruit, toast, eggs, and orange juice, Mrs. Harrison liked her coffee strong and black, while Mr. Harrison preferred tea with a little bit of honey. Their son Jacob was 14 years old and usually ate cereal or pancakes before going to school. Maria liked Jacob. He was different from his parents. While Mr. and Mrs. Harrison rarely spoke to Maria except to give her orders, Jacob always said good morning to her and sometimes asked how she was doing. He treated her like a real person, not just a servant. This small kindness meant a lot to Maria. She remembered her own son back home, who was about the same age as Jacob. The other staff members in the mansion included a gardener named Tom, who came 3 times a week, a driver named Robert, who took the family wherever they needed to go, and another maid named Susan, who worked during the afternoons and evenings. Maria usually worked the morning shift, which meant she started early but finished by mid-afternoon. Unless the family had a special event or needed extra help, life in the mansion was always busy. Mr. Harrison worked long hours at his company and often came home late at night. Mrs. Harrison spent most of her time shopping with her friends, going to fancy parties, or attending charity events where rich people gathered to feel good about themselves. Jacob went to an expensive private school where all the other students came from wealthy families just like his. Maria had learned to stay invisible in the mansion. She knew exactly how to clean each room without disturbing anything. She knew which cleaning products Mrs. Harrison preferred and which ones she said had a smell that was too strong. She knew that Mr. Harrison hated wrinkles in his shirts and that Jacob always forgot to pick up his dirty clothes from the bathroom floor. Despite working in such a beautiful place, Maria often felt lonely. She missed her family terribly. Her husband had passed away 2 years ago, and she was now the only one earning money to support her 2 children and her elderly mother. She sent most of her salary back home every month, keeping only a little bit for herself. She dreamed of the day when she could save enough money to return home and open a small business, maybe a little shop or a restaurant. The hardest part of Maria's job was not the physical work. Even though her back often hurt from bending and lifting heavy things all day, the hardest part was feeling like she did not matter. Mrs. Harrison sometimes forgot her name and called her by the previous maid's name. Mr. Harrison walked past her in the hallways as if she was invisible. Only Jacob seemed to remember that she was a real person with feelings and a life outside these walls. Today was Tuesday, and Maria knew it would be another typical day. She finished preparing breakfast and set everything on the large dining table. The family came down one by one. Mr. Harrison was already on his phone, talking loudly about some business deal. Mrs. Harrison looked at the breakfast table and nodded slightly, which meant Maria had done everything correctly. Jacob smiled at Maria and said thank you, which made her smile back. After breakfast, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison left for an important business meeting in another city. They told Maria they would be gone all day and might not return until late evening.
Susan, the other maid, had called earlier to say she was sick and could not come to work today.
Robert, the driver, had taken Mr. and Mrs. Harrison to their meeting. Tom, the gardener, only came on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. This meant Maria was completely alone in the mansion with Jacob, who had stayed home from school because he said he was not feeling well. Maria felt a little worried about being alone, but she had been in this situation before, and nothing bad had ever happened. She went upstairs to start cleaning the bedrooms while Jacob stayed in his room, playing video games and resting. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed peaceful. Maria had no idea that in just a few hours, her entire life would change forever. Maria finished cleaning the master bedroom and moved on to the guest rooms. She dusted the furniture, changed the bed sheets, and made sure every corner was spotless. The morning sun came through the large windows and made the rooms bright and warm. Everything felt calm and peaceful in the big mansion. Maria hummed a soft song while she worked, thinking about her children back home and wondering what they were doing at that moment. Around 11 o'clock in the morning, Maria decided to check on Jacob. She wanted to ask if he needed anything to eat or drink since he had stayed home from school. She walked down the long hallway toward his bedroom, her footsteps quiet on the expensive carpet. She knocked gently on his door and waited for him to answer. There was no response. Maria knocked again. A little louder this time, still nothing. She felt a small worry begin to grow in her chest. Maybe he was sleeping, she thought. Maybe he had his headphones on and could not hear her knocking. She slowly opened the door and peeked inside. What she saw made her heart stop. Jacob was lying on his bed. But something was terribly wrong. His face was very pale, almost gray, and his lips had a strange blue color to them. He was breathing, but each breath sounded difficult and painful, like he was trying to breathe through a tiny straw. His chest moved up and down in a strange way, and sweat covered his forehead even though the room was not hot. Maria rushed to his side immediately. Her hands were shaking as she touched his shoulder gently. "Jacob," she called his name. "Jacob, can you hear me?" The young boy opened his eyes slowly. They looked tired and scared. He tried to speak, but could only make a weak sound. His hand reached up and clutched his chest, telling Maria without words that something was very wrong inside. Panic filled Maria's mind, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to think clearly now. She had to help this boy. She remembered that Jacob had asthma, a condition that made it hard for him to breathe sometimes. She had seen Mrs. Harrison give him an inhaler before, a small device that helped him breathe better during attacks. Maria looked around the room frantically, searching for the inhaler. She found it on his desk and brought it to him quickly. Jacob tried to use it, but his hands were too weak and shaky. Maria helped him, pressing the inhaler to his lips and telling him to breathe in slowly. Jacob tried, but nothing seemed to help. His breathing was getting worse, not better. His eyes began to close and his body started to go limp. Maria's heart pounded in her chest like a drum. This was not a normal asthma attack. This was something much more serious. Jacob needed to get to a hospital immediately, or something terrible might happen. Maria pulled out her old mobile phone from her pocket with trembling fingers. She tried to dial the emergency number, but her phone showed no signal bars. The mansion's thick walls and isolated location made it hard for phone signals to reach inside sometimes. She ran to the hallway where the house telephone was mounted on the wall. She picked it up and pressed it to her ear. But there was only silence. The line was dead. Someone must have forgotten to pay the bill. Or maybe there was a problem with the connection. Maria wanted to scream in frustration, but she knew that would not help Jacob. She ran back to Jacob's room. The boy was now barely conscious. His breathing had become even more shallow and weak. His skin looked almost transparent, and his body felt cold when Maria touched him. Time was running out fast. Maria knew she had to make a decision right now. Every second mattered. Every moment could be the difference between life and death. Maria thought about running to a neighbor's house to ask for help. But the Harrison mansion was on a large private property. The nearest neighbor was more than a mile away through the gates and down the road. Running there and back would take at least 20 minutes. Maybe longer. Jacob did not have 20 minutes. He might not even have 10 minutes. She thought about waiting for someone to come home, but Mr. and Mrs. Harrison had said they would not return until evening. That was hours away. Robert the driver was with them. Susan the other maid was sick at home. Tom the gardener would not come until tomorrow. There was nobody else. It was just Maria and this dying boy in this huge empty mansion. Maria felt tears begin to fill her eyes. She thought about her own son back home. She thought about how she would feel if he was sick and dying, and nobody helped him. She looked at Jacob's face, so young and innocent, and she knew she could not let him die. She would not let him die. She had to do something, anything, even if it meant breaking the rules, even if it meant getting into terrible trouble. Then Maria remembered the cars in the garage. Mr. Harrison had 5 expensive cars, including that bright yellow Lamborghini that he loved so much. Maria had never driven a car like that before. She had only driven old, simple cars back in her hometown. She was not even sure if she remembered how to drive anymore, because she had not driven anything in more than 3 years. But what choice did she have? Jacob was dying, and the hospital was only 15 minutes away if she drove fast. Maria made her decision in that moment. She would take the car. She would save Jacob's life no matter what happened to her afterward. She did not care if she lost her job. She did not care if Mr. Harrison called the police. She did not care if everyone thought she was a thief. The only thing that mattered right now was saving this young boy's life. Maria gently lifted Jacob in her arms. He was tall for his age but very thin, so she could carry him even though her own body was small and tired from years of hard work. She moved as quickly as she could, carrying him down the stairs, through the hallway and toward the garage. Jacob's head rested against her shoulder, and she could feel his weak breath against her neck. "Hold on," she whispered to him. "Just hold on a little bit longer. I am going to save you." Maria reached the door that connected the mansion to the garage. Her arms ached from carrying Jacob, but she did not stop moving. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and stepped into the cool, dim space where the Harrison family kept their collection of expensive vehicles. The garage was enormous, almost as big as a regular house, and it smelled like leather, polish, and gasoline. 5 cars sat in a perfect row, each one gleaming under the overhead lights that turned on automatically when Maria entered. There was a black Mercedes that Mrs. Harrison drove to her shopping trips, a silver BMW that Mr. Harrison used for business meetings, a white Range Rover for family trips, a red Ferrari that Mr. Harrison only drove on special occasions, and in the center spot, the bright yellow Lamborghini that was his absolute pride and joy. Maria had cleaned these cars many times before. She had wiped their windows, vacuumed their interiors, and polished their bodies until they shined like mirrors. But she had never sat in the driver's seat of any of them. She had never touched their steering wheels or pressed their gas pedals. These cars were not for people like her. These cars cost more money than she would earn in her entire lifetime. She looked at Jacob in her arms. His breathing was now so quiet that she had to watch his chest closely to make sure he was still alive. His face had gone from pale to almost white, and his body felt heavy and lifeless. Maria knew she had no time to think about which car to take or whether she was making the right choice. She needed to act now. She carefully laid Jacob down on the smooth concrete floor for just a moment while she searched for car keys. She knew the Harrison family kept spare keys somewhere in the garage. She had seen Robert, the driver, grab them before when he needed to move the cars around. Her eyes scanned the walls frantically until she spotted a wooden key box mounted near the entrance. Maria rushed to the box and opened it. Inside hung 5 sets of keys, each one attached to a small tag with the car's name written on it. Her hand hovered over them, shaking. Should she take the Mercedes? It looked like the easiest one to drive. Should she take the Range Rover? It was bigger and might be safer. But then her eyes fell on the Lamborghini keys. Something inside Maria's mind told her that the Lamborghini was the fastest car in the garage. Speed was what mattered right now. Every second counted. She needed to get Jacob to the hospital as quickly as possible. The Lamborghini could do that. She grabbed the keys without thinking anymore and hurried back to where Jacob lay. Picking him up again took all of her remaining strength. Her back screamed in pain, and her arms felt like they might give out at any moment. But she pushed through the discomfort and carried Jacob to the yellow Lamborghini. The car sat low to the ground, much lower than normal cars. Maria had to figure out how to open the door while holding Jacob at the same time. She pressed a button on the key, and the door opened upward instead of outward like normal car doors. It moved like a wing, rising into the air in a smooth, mechanical motion. Maria had never seen anything like it before, but she did not have time to be amazed. She carefully placed Jacob in the passenger seat. His head fell to the side and his eyes remained closed. She quickly fastened the seatbelt around him, making sure it was secure. Then Maria walked around to the driver's side and pressed the button again. The door rose up and she slid into the driver's seat. The interior of the Lamborghini was like nothing she had ever experienced. Everything was leather and carbon fiber. The seats hugged her body. The dashboard had more buttons and screens than she could count. The steering wheel was thick and covered in smooth leather. Everything smelled expensive and new. Maria's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her heart hammered in her chest so hard that she thought it might burst. She had not driven a car in 3 years. And now she was about to drive one of the most expensive and powerful cars in the world. She did not even know if she remembered how to do it. What if she crashed? What if she made Jacob's condition worse? What if she could not figure out how to start the engine? She looked at the key in her hand and then at the dashboard. There was a button that said start on it. She pressed it, and the engine roared to life with a sound so loud and powerful that it made her jump in her seat. The entire car vibrated with energy. It felt like sitting on top of a sleeping tiger that had just woken up. The dashboard lit up with colorful lights and displays showing information that Maria did not understand. Maria took a deep breath and tried to remember everything she knew about driving. Gas pedal on the right, brake pedal on the left. No, wait, that was not right. Brake pedal in the middle, gas pedal on the right. She looked down at her feet and saw 3 pedals. 3. Why were there 3? Then she remembered that some cars had manual transmission, which meant she would have to use a clutch and change gears herself. Panic rose in her throat. She had only ever driven automatic cars before. She did not know how to drive a manual transmission, especially not in a car as complicated as this one. But when she looked at the gear shifter, she saw letters that looked familiar. P for park, R for reverse, DI for drive. Relief washed over her. This car had an automatic option. She would not have to figure out the clutch and gears. Maria shifted the gear from P to D. She looked at Jacob one more time. The boy was completely still now. She could not even tell if he was breathing anymore. Terror filled every part of her body. She had to move now. She had to drive. There was no more time for fear or doubt. She pressed her foot down on the gas pedal. The Lamborghini shot forward with incredible force, so fast and powerful that Maria's body pressed back into the seat. She screamed and immediately slammed on the brakes. The car stopped so suddenly that both she and Jacob jerked forward against their seatbelts. Maria's breathing was rapid and panicked. This car was not like anything she had ever driven before. It responded to every tiny movement with explosive power. She tried again, this time pressing the gas pedal much more gently. The car moved forward smoothly. She steered it carefully toward the garage door, which automatically began to open as she approached. Sunlight poured in from outside, bright and blinding. Maria squinted her eyes and kept driving. The Lamborghini rolled out of the garage and onto the long driveway that led to the main road. Maria looked at Jacob again. "Please hold on," she whispered. "Please do not die. I'm taking you to help now. Just hold on for me." Then she pressed the gas pedal harder and pointed the bright yellow Lamborghini toward the hospital, praying that she would make it in time. The bright yellow Lamborghini moved down the long private driveway that connected the Harrison mansion to the main road. Maria's knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so tightly, her whole body was tense, and sweat dripped down her face even though the car's air conditioning was blowing cold air. She had never felt so scared in her entire life, but she also had never felt so determined. The driveway seemed to stretch on forever. Tall trees lined both sides, their branches creating shadows that made the sunlight flicker as the car passed underneath. Maria kept glancing over at Jacob every few seconds, checking to see if his chest was still moving. Sometimes she thought she saw him breathe, and other times she was not sure. Each time she looked and saw no movement, her foot pressed harder on the gas pedal. Finally, the mansion gates appeared ahead. They were made of black iron and stood at least 12 feet tall. Normally, they opened automatically when a car approached. Maria had seen this happen many times when Mr. Harrison came and went, but as the Lamborghini got closer, the gates remained closed. Maria's heart sank. She had forgotten that the automatic sensor might not work, or perhaps there was a special code needed to open them from the inside. She stopped the car right in front of the gates and looked around desperately for a button or a control panel. She spotted a small remote control clipped to the sun visor above her head. She grabbed it with shaking hands and pressed every button on it until finally, the gates began to swing open slowly, too slowly. Maria wanted to scream at them to move faster. Every second felt like an hour. Every moment Jacob spent without proper medical care reduced his chances of survival. The gates opened fully, and Maria pressed the gas pedal. The Lamborghini burst forward onto the main road with a roar. The sudden acceleration surprised her again, and the car swerved slightly before she managed to get it under control. Her heart pounded even harder. She could not afford to crash, not now. Not when Jacob's life depended on her. The main road was not very busy at this time of day. Most people were at work or at home having lunch. Maria tried to remember the way to the hospital. She had been there once before when she got sick with a bad fever during her first year working for the Harrisons. It was in the center of the city, about 15 minutes away if traffic was light. She needed to drive straight for about 5 miles, then turn left at the big intersection near the shopping mall. Then continue for another 3 miles. Maria pressed harder on the gas pedal, and the Lamborghini responded immediately. The speedometer climbed quickly. 40 miles per hour, 50, 60, 70. The world outside the windows became a blur of colors and shapes. Other cars seemed to be moving in slow motion compared to the powerful sports car. The engine roared loudly, creating a sound that made Maria feel both terrified and powerful at the same time. She passed a slower car on the left, then another one on the right. The Lamborghini handled so differently from the old cars she had driven years ago. It felt tight and responsive, like it could read her thoughts and move before she even turned the steering wheel. But this also made it dangerous. One wrong move, one moment of panic, and she could lose control completely. A traffic light ahead turned yellow. Maria knew she should slow down and stop, but when she looked at Jacob, she saw that his lips were now a darker shade of blue. His skin looked almost gray, like all the life was draining out of him. She could not stop. She would not stop. She pressed the gas pedal all the way down and shot through the intersection just as the light turned red. Horns blared behind her, angry drivers shouting words she could not hear, but Maria did not care. Her eyes filled with tears. Making it hard to see the road clearly, she blinked them away and forced herself to focus. Crying would not help Jacob. Only getting to the hospital would help him. She wiped her face with one hand while steering with the other. The Lamborghini drifted slightly toward the center line, and Maria quickly corrected it. Her inexperience with such a powerful car was showing, but somehow she managed to keep it under control. The shopping mall intersection appeared ahead. Maria saw the left turn she needed to take, but she was moving too fast. She pressed the brake pedal, and the car slowed down dramatically. The anti-lock brakes made a strange pulsing sound under her foot. She turned the steering wheel hard to the left, and the Lamborghini swept around the corner. The tires squealed loudly against the pavement, and Maria felt the back of the car start to slide out to the right. For a terrifying moment, she thought she was going to crash. The car was spinning, the world was rotating around her. But then the tires gripped the road again, and the Lamborghini straightened out. Maria's breath came out in short gasps. Her entire body was shaking now. She had almost lost control. She had almost crashed Mr. Harrison's most precious possession. She had almost killed both herself and Jacob. But she had not crashed. They were still moving. Still heading toward the hospital, Maria accelerated again, though not quite as fast as before. She had learned that this car demanded respect. It was too powerful for someone like her to handle recklessly. She needed to be more careful, more controlled, even though every instinct in her body screamed at her to go faster. 3 more miles. Just 3 more miles and they would be at the hospital. Maria started praying silently, asking God to keep Jacob alive, asking for forgiveness for stealing the car, asking for strength to complete this desperate journey. She had never been a very religious person, but right now, prayer was all she had besides her determination. The road ahead stretched straight for a long distance. Maria could see other cars in the distance, moving slowly, going about their normal day, completely unaware that a poor maid was racing past them in a stolen Lamborghini, trying desperately to save a young boy's life. None of them knew that inside this bright yellow symbol of wealth and luxury, a simple woman was making the most important drive of her entire life. Jacob made a small sound, a weak moan that was barely audible over the engine noise. Maria's head snapped toward him. His eyes were still closed, but at least the sound meant he was still alive. "Still fighting, hang on, Jacob," Maria said out loud, her voice cracking with emotion. "We are almost there. You are going to be okay. I promise you are going to be okay." She did not know if he could hear her. She did not know if her promise was one she could actually keep, but she needed to believe it. She needed to believe that this crazy, desperate, dangerous decision would save his life, because if it did not, Maria knew she would never forgive herself. Maria could see the hospital building in the distance now. It was a large white structure with many windows and a big red sign that said emergency in bold letters. Relief flooded through her body, but it was mixed with fear because she knew that getting to the hospital was only half of the battle. She still needed to get Jacob inside and make sure the doctors could save him. The Lamborghini roared down the street, drawing attention from everyone nearby. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared at the bright yellow sports car as it passed. Some took out their phones to record videos, thinking they were seeing some rich person showing off their expensive toy. None of them knew that inside the car, a desperate woman was fighting to save a child's life. Maria saw the hospital entrance getting closer. Her mind raced as she tried to figure out what to do next. Should she park the car properly in the parking lot? That would take time that Jacob did not have. Should she stop right in front of the emergency entrance? That seemed like the right choice. but she did not know if it was allowed. She had never been in this situation before. She made her decision quickly. Jacob's life was more important than following parking rules. She would stop directly in front of the emergency entrance, even if it blocked other cars, even if it caused problems. The doctors needed to see Jacob immediately, and carrying him from a distant parking spot would waste precious minutes. Maria pressed the brake pedal and the Lamborghini slowed down rapidly. She turned the steering wheel and guided the car off the main road and into the hospital driveway. The entrance to the emergency department was right ahead, marked with large red letters and bright lights. There were other cars nearby, ambulances parked in special spots, people walking in and out of the automatic doors. She brought the Lamborghini to a stop right in front of the main entrance. The car sat in the middle of the driveway, blocking the path that other vehicles would normally use. Maria did not care. She pressed the button to open her door, and it swung upward into the air. She climbed out quickly, her legs shaky and weak from the stress and adrenaline. Maria ran around to the passenger side and opened Jacob's door. The boy was completely motionless now. His head had fallen forward against the seatbelt, and his arms hung limply at his sides. His face was pale like marble, and his lips were dark blue. Maria's heart felt like it was breaking as she looked at him. She reached in and unbuckled his seatbelt, then carefully lifted him out of the car. Jacob felt so light in her arms, too light, as if all the life had already left his body. Maria refused to believe that. She refused to give up. She kicked the car door closed with her foot and ran toward the emergency entrance. The automatic glass doors slid open as she approached, and she burst into the hospital lobby. "Help!" Maria screamed at the top of her lungs. "Please help. This boy needs a doctor right now. He cannot breathe. Please help him." Her voice echoed through the lobby, raw with desperation and fear. Several people in the waiting area turned to look at her. Their eyes went wide when they saw the unconscious boy in her arms. A woman in blue scrubs appeared immediately. She was a triage nurse whose job was to quickly assess patients and determine who needed help most urgently. The nurse took one look at Jacob and her professional training kicked in instantly. She could see the blue lips, the pale skin, the lack of movement. This was a critical emergency. "Bring him here right now," the nurse commanded, pointing toward a set of doors that led into the treatment area. Maria followed her, moving as fast as her tired legs could carry her. They went through the doors into a bright hallway filled with medical equipment and busy hospital staff. The nurse guided Maria into an examination room and pointed to a bed. "Put him down here," the nurse said, and Maria gently laid Jacob on the bed. His body looked so small and fragile on the white sheets. The nurse immediately began checking his vital signs, pressing her fingers against his neck to feel for a pulse. Watching his chest to see if he was breathing, her face was calm and professional. But Maria could see the urgency in her movements. The nurse pressed a button on the wall, and suddenly an alarm sounded throughout the emergency department. Within seconds, more nurses and doctors came running into the room. They surrounded Jacob's bed, each person knowing exactly what to do. One nurse placed an oxygen mask over Jacob's face. Another started attaching monitors to his chest to track his heart rate. A doctor began examining him, shining a light in his eyes, listening to his chest with a stethoscope. Maria stood back against the wall, feeling helpless and useless now. She had done her part by getting Jacob here. But now it was up to the medical professionals to save him. She watched them work with amazing speed and coordination, calling out medical terms she did not understand, preparing equipment, giving instructions to each other. "Someone bring me an IV line," a doctor shouted. "We need to get fluids into him immediately," a nurse responded instantly, rolling over a metal cart with tubes and needles. Another doctor asked about Jacob's medical history. "Does anyone know if this patient has any allergies or existing conditions?" Maria stepped forward, her voice shaking. "He has asthma," she said. "He had an attack this morning. I gave him his inhaler, but it did not help. He got worse very quickly," the doctors nodded. Taking in this information and adjusting their treatment plan accordingly, one of the nurses looked at Maria carefully for the first time, noticing her simple maid's uniform, her worn shoes, her exhausted face. "Who are you?" the nurse asked. "Are you his mother?" Maria shook her head. "No, I am the family's maid. His parents are away. I found him sick and brought him here." The nurse's eyes widened slightly, showing surprise. But she did not ask any more questions right now. The focus needed to stay on Jacob. Maria watched as they inserted a needle into Jacob's arm and connected it to a bag of clear liquid hanging from a pole. They adjusted the oxygen mask and increased the flow. They injected something into the IV line, medication that would hopefully help him breathe better. Come on, Jacob, one of the doctors said quietly. Come on, son, stay with us. Maria felt tears streaming down her face. She had never prayed so hard in her entire life. She watched the monitors, seeing lines and numbers that she did not fully understand, but knowing that they represented whether Jacob would live or die. Then, after what felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, something changed. Jacob's chest began to move more noticeably. The blue color in his lips started to fade slightly, becoming a lighter shade. One of the monitors began beeping in a more regular rhythm. The doctors and nurses exchanged looks, small nods of cautious optimism. He is responding, a doctor announced. His oxygen levels are coming up. Keep monitoring him closely. Maria's knees felt weak with relief. Jacob was not out of danger yet, but at least he was fighting. At least the treatment was working. She leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was, how much her whole body was shaking. Maria stayed pressed against the wall of the examination room, watching the medical team continue their work on Jacob. The room was filled with the sounds of beeping monitors, quiet conversations between doctors and nurses, and the hiss of oxygen flowing through the mask on Jacob's face. Every few seconds, Maria's eyes went to the boy's chest, checking to make sure it was still moving up and down, reassuring herself that he was still alive. A young doctor with kind eyes approached Maria, while the others continued monitoring Jacob's vital signs. "Ma'am, you did the right thing bringing him here when you did," the doctor said softly. "Another 10 or 15 minutes and we might not have been able to help him. His condition was extremely critical." Maria nodded, unable to speak because her throat was tight with emotion. She had been so afraid that she would be too late. The doctor asked Maria more questions about what had happened that morning. She explained everything as clearly as she could, how she had found Jacob struggling to breathe, how his inhaler had not helped, how she could not reach anyone by phone, how she had made the desperate decision to drive him to the hospital herself. The doctor listened carefully, taking notes on a clipboard, nodding with understanding. "We are going to move him to the intensive care unit for closer monitoring," the doctor explained. "He is stable now, but we want to keep a very close eye on him for the next 24 hours. We also need to contact his parents immediately. Do you have a phone number where we can reach them?" Maria pulled out her old phone. Her hands were still shaking as she scrolled through the contacts to find Mrs. Harrison's number. She read it aloud to the doctor, who wrote it down quickly. "Thank you," the doctor said. "You should wait in the family waiting area while we get him settled. A nurse will come talk to you soon." Maria wanted to stay close to Jacob, but she knew she needed to let the medical professionals do their work. She took one last look at the boy, seeing that his face had regained some color and his breathing looked more normal. Then she walked out of the examination room. The hallway seemed longer and brighter than before. Maria's legs felt like they might give out at any moment. The adrenaline that had kept her going during the desperate drive was fading now, leaving behind exhaustion and the beginning realization of what she had done. She had taken Mr. Harrison's most valuable possession without permission. She had driven it recklessly through the city, breaking traffic laws and risking an accident. She had left it parked illegally in front of the hospital entrance. The hospital entrance, Maria suddenly remembered the Lamborghini sitting outside. Blocking the emergency driveway, she needed to move it before it caused problems or got towed away. She turned and walked quickly back toward the main entrance. Her heart was still beating fast, but now it was from worry about the car rather than worry about Jacob. When Maria pushed through the automatic doors and stepped outside, she saw that a small crowd had gathered around the bright yellow Lamborghini. People were taking pictures with their phones, pointing at it and talking excitedly. 2 hospital security guards stood near the car, looking concerned and talking into their radios. One of them was writing something in a notebook. Maria walked toward them, her steps slow and hesitant. "Excuse me," she said quietly. I am the one who brought that car here." Both security guards turned to look at her. Their eyes moved from her simple maid's uniform to her worn shoes to her tired face. Then they looked back at the expensive Lamborghini. Confusion was clear on their faces. "You drove this car here?" one of the guards asked, his voice skeptical. Maria nodded. "Yes, sir, there was a medical emergency. I had to bring a boy to the hospital very quickly. He was dying. I had no choice." The security guards exchanged glances, clearly not sure whether to believe her story, "Ma'am. This vehicle is blocking the emergency entrance," the second guard said, his tone more stern. "We have had to redirect 2 ambulances already. You need to move it immediately or we will have to have it towed. And we also need to see your driver's license and the vehicle registration." Maria's stomach dropped. She had not thought about needing those documents. She had been so focused on saving Jacob that she had not considered the practical consequences of her actions. "I do not have those things with me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The car belongs to my employer, Mr. Harrison. I took it without permission because his son was dying." The security guard's expressions changed from confusion to suspicion. "So you are saying you stole this car?" The first guard asked. "Ma'am, I am going to have to call the police." "This is a serious matter." Fear shot through Maria's body. She had known this moment would come, but she had hoped it would be later, after she knew for certain that Jacob would be okay. "Please," Maria said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I know what I did was wrong, but I had to save the boy. He could not breathe. Nobody else was there to help. I did what I had to do. Please just let me move the car so it is not blocking anything. Then you can call whoever you need to call." The second guard seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded. "All right, move it to the visitor parking lot over there," he said, pointing to an area about 50 yards away. "But do not try to leave. We will be watching, and the police are already on their way." Maria nodded, grateful for at least this small mercy. She climbed back into the Lamborghini, her body aching all over now. The leather seat that had felt so strange and uncomfortable during the frantic drive now felt almost familiar. She started the engine and it roared to life just as powerfully as before. But this time, Maria did not feel afraid of it. She had already driven this beast through the city at high speed. Moving it 50 yards would be nothing. She carefully steered the car away from the emergency entrance and into the visitor parking lot. She found an empty space and parked the Lamborghini as neatly as she could. When she turned off the engine, the sudden silence felt strange. For the first time since finding Jacob sick in his room, Maria had a moment to sit still and think about everything that had happened. She looked at her hands, still trembling slightly. She looked at the expensive dashboard with all its lights and displays. She looked at the passenger seat where Jacob had sat, unconscious and barely alive just a short time ago. Had she really just done all of this? Had she really stolen a car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and driven it like a race car driver through city streets? Maria closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Yes, she had done all of that, and she would do it again if she had to. Because saving Jacob's life was worth any consequence she would now have to face. Even if she lost her job, even if she got arrested, even if Mr. Harrison hated her forever, she had saved a young boy's life, and nothing could take that away from her. She opened the car door and stepped out. The two security guards were standing nearby, watching her carefully. One of them was still talking into his radio, beyond them. Maria could see the hospital entrance where she had carried Jacob just minutes before. Somewhere inside that building, doctors were taking care of him, making sure he would survive. That was all that mattered. Maria walked slowly toward the security guards, ready to face whatever came next. She had broken the rules, but she had done it for the right reason. Now she would have to trust that people would understand. She would have to trust that the truth would be enough. Maria stood between the two security guards in the hospital parking lot, waiting for the police to arrive. Her heart felt heavy in her chest, not from fear for herself, but from worry about what would happen next. She kept glancing back at the hospital entrance, wondering how Jacob was doing, wondering if the doctors had managed to reach his parents yet. About 15 minutes passed before a police car pulled into the parking lot. Its lights flashing but its siren silent, two officers stepped out. One older with gray hair and a serious expression, the other younger and looking curious about the situation. The security guards immediately walked over to speak with them, pointing at Maria and then at the bright yellow Lamborghini. The older police officer approached Maria slowly, his hand resting on his belt near his radio. "Ma'am, I am Officer Davidson," he said in a firm but not unkind voice. "These security guards tell me you drove this vehicle here without the owner's permission. Is that correct?" Maria nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, sir, that is correct. I took the car without asking because there was an emergency." Officer Davidson pulled out a small notebook and pen. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Start from the beginning." Maria took a deep breath and told her story again, explaining how she worked as a maid for the Harrison family, how she had found Jacob unable to breathe, how nobody else was available to help, how she had made the desperate decision to take the car and drive him to the hospital herself. The officer wrote everything down carefully, asking questions occasionally to clarify details. The younger officer walked over to examine the Lamborghini, looking at it from all angles, checking for any damage. "Where are the boy's parents now?" Officer Davidson asked. Maria explained that Mr. and Mrs. Harrison had gone to a business meeting in another city and that the hospital staff was trying to contact them. Just as Officer Davidson was about to ask another question, there was a commotion near the hospital entrance. A tall man in an expensive suit came rushing out of the automatic doors, his face red with emotion, his tie loose around his neck. It was Mr. Harrison. He must have received the hospital's phone call and rushed here immediately. Behind him came Mrs. Harrison, her high heels clicking rapidly on the pavement, her designer handbag swinging from her arm. "Where is he, Mr. Harrison?" shouted at no one in particular. "Where is my son? Is he alive?" One of the security guards quickly directed him back toward the emergency entrance, explaining that Jacob was being moved to the intensive care unit but was stable. Mr. Harrison barely seemed to hear him. He disappeared back into the hospital with his wife following close behind. The police officers looked at each other. "Well," Officer Davidson said, "I suppose we will get to speak with the vehicle owner now. Let us go inside and see what he has to say about all this." Maria felt her stomach twist with anxiety. She followed the officers back into the hospital, her legs feeling weak and unsteady. Inside, a nurse directed them to a private waiting room where the Harrison family had been taken. Maria hesitated at the doorway, afraid to face the people she had worked for, afraid to see their anger and disappointment. But Officer Davidson gently touched her shoulder, indicating she should come inside. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison were sitting together on a small couch, holding each other's hands. Their faces were still pale with shock and worry when Mr. Harrison looked up and saw Maria standing with the police officers. His expression changed. Maria could not quite read what she saw there. "Was it anger? Was it confusion, Mr. Harrison?" Officer Davidson began. "We need to speak with you about your vehicle. Your employee here, what is your name, ma'am?" Maria supplied quietly. "Maria took your Lamborghini without permission this morning and drove it here to the hospital. She says it was because your son was having a medical emergency and she needed to get him help immediately." Mr. Harrison stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Maria's face. His jaw was tight, and Maria prepared herself for his fury. She knew the Lamborghini was his most prized possession. She knew how much money it was worth. She knew she had committed a serious crime by taking it. "My Lamborghini," Mr. Harrison said slowly. "You took my Lamborghini?" "Yes, sir," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am very sorry. I know I should not have, but Jacob was dying and I could not reach anyone. And I did not know what else to do." Tears began flowing down her cheeks. "I am so sorry. I will accept whatever punishment you think is right. I just wanted to save your son, Mr." Harrison took a step toward her and Maria flinched, expecting him to yell or perhaps even try to strike her. But instead, something completely unexpected happened. His face suddenly crumpled and tears began streaming down his own cheeks. He crossed the distance between them in 2 quick strides and pulled Maria into a tight embrace. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Thank you for saving my son's life." Maria stood frozen, completely shocked by this reaction. She had expected anger, accusations, maybe even arrest, but not this. Not gratitude. Not tears of relief and appreciation, Mr. Harrison pulled back and held Maria by the shoulders, looking directly into her eyes. "You saved Jacob," he said. "Do you understand? The doctors told me that if you had waited even 10 more minutes, he might have died." Mrs. Harrison stood up and came over as well, her own eyes red from crying. She took Maria's hands in hers. "We can never repay you for what you have done," she said softly. "You risked everything to save our son. We are so grateful, so incredibly grateful." Maria could not speak. She could only cry harder. Overwhelmed by their reaction, Officer Davidson cleared his throat. "So, Mr. Harrison, are you saying you do not wish to press charges against Maria for taking your vehicle, Mr.?" Harrison turned to face the officer, his expression suddenly fierce. "Press charges? Are you serious? This woman is a hero. She saved my son's life. I would give her 10 Lamborghinis if I could. No, I absolutely will not press charges. In fact, I want to thank her properly." The officer nodded, making notes in his notebook. "All right then. If the vehicle owner does not wish to press charges, then there is no theft, Maria. You are free to go. However, I should mention that several people reported seeing the Lamborghini being driven recklessly through the city, running a red light and speeding. You could potentially face traffic violations." Mr. Harrison waved his hand dismissively. "Send any tickets to me. I will pay them all, every single one. Maria did nothing wrong. She did what any decent human being would do. She saved a child's life." The officer looked like he wanted to argue, but seeing the determination on Mr. Harrison's face, he simply nodded and closed his notebook. "All right, if everything is settled here, my partner and I will file our report and be on our way. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison, I hope your son makes a full recovery. The officers left the room, and Maria found herself alone with the Harrison family. Mr. Harrison sat down heavily, suddenly looking exhausted. I have been a terrible employer, he said quietly. I have worked with you for 3 years, and I barely knew your name. I treated you like you were invisible, and yet when my son needed help, you risked everything to save him. Maria shook her head. Any person would have done the same thing, she said. No, Mrs., Harrison said firmly. Not any person would have done what you did. You could have just called for help and waited. You could have been too afraid to drive a car like that. You could have thought only about yourself and the consequences, but you did not. You acted with courage and compassion. Maria felt warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in a very long time, the feeling of being truly seen and valued. 3 days had passed since that terrifying morning when Maria had driven the bright yellow Lamborghini through the city streets. Jacob had recovered remarkably well thanks to the quick medical intervention. The doctors explained that he had suffered a severe asthma attack combined with an allergic reaction to something he had eaten. The combination had caused his airways to close dangerously, making it nearly impossible for him to breathe. Maria visited Jacob in the hospital every day after her work shifts, bringing him small gifts like books and puzzles to keep him entertained. Jacob always smiled when she entered his room, and he told everyone who would listen that Maria had saved his life. The nurses on the floor came to know her story, and many of them treated her with special kindness and respect. On the 4th day, Mr. Harrison asked Maria to come to his office at the mansion. She felt nervous as she walked through the familiar hallways, wondering what he wanted to discuss. Perhaps he had changed his mind about pressing charges. Perhaps he was going to fire her after all. She knocked on the heavy wooden door and heard his voice call for her to enter. Maria stepped inside and found both Mr. and Mrs. Harrison sitting together, waiting for her. Please sit down, Maria, Mr. Harrison said, gesturing to a comfortable leather chair across from his desk. Maria sat carefully, her hands folded in her lap. Her heart beating fast, Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and looked at his wife before beginning to speak. Maria, we have done a lot of thinking over the past few days. Mr. Harrison said, we realize that we have not treated you with the respect and dignity you deserve.
You have worked in our home for 3 years,
taking care of our belongings, our meals, and our comfort. Yet we barely acknowledged your presence. We took you for granted, Mrs. Harrison leaned forward, her eyes sincere and warm. What you did for Jacob showed us the kind of person you truly are. She said softly, you are brave, compassionate, and selfless. You risked everything to save our son, and we can never adequately express our gratitude. Mr. Harrison nodded. We want to make some changes, he continued. First, we are giving you a significant raise in your salary. You will now earn 3 times what you were making before. Additionally, we are setting up a special fund for your children's education. We want to make sure they have every opportunity to succeed in life. Maria's eyes widened in shock. She could not believe what she was hearing. That is too much, she whispered. You do not need to do all that. I was just doing what anyone would do. No, Mr. Harrison said firmly. You were doing what a hero does. Most people would have been too afraid to act, too worried about the consequences. But you chose to save a life over protecting yourself. That deserves to be rewarded, Mrs. Harrison pulled out an envelope from her purse and handed it to Maria. Inside this envelope is a check for $25,000. She said, we want you to use this money however you see fit. Send it to your family, save it for your future, or use it to finally go home and start that business you have always dreamed about. Tears streamed down Maria's face as she held the envelope with shaking hands. She had never seen so much money in her entire life. This amount could change everything for her family. Her children could finish their education. Her mother could receive better medical care. She could finally achieve the dream of opening her own small restaurant. But there is something else, Mr. Harrison added. We have also made arrangements for you to take a 2-week paid vacation immediately. You need time to rest and recover from the stress of what happened. When you return, if you choose to return, we would like to offer you a new position. A new position, Maria asked, confusion showing on her face. Yes, Mrs. Harrison explained. We have realized that we need someone to manage the household staff and operations. We want to offer you the position of household manager. You would oversee all the cleaning, cooking, and maintenance. You would have your own office, better living quarters, and much more responsibility. Of course, this comes with an even higher salary. Maria could hardly process what she was hearing. Just a few days ago, she had been an invisible maid, someone whose name the family barely remembered. Now she was being offered a position of respect and authority. She felt overwhelmed by their generosity and kindness. "I do not know what to say," Maria managed to whisper through her tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Thank you, Maria," Mr. Harrison said, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "You gave us back our son. Nothing we do can ever truly repay that debt." Later that afternoon, Maria sat in her small room, looking at the check and the papers describing her new position and benefits. She thought about how much her life had changed in just a few days. She had gone from being invisible to being valued, from being overlooked to being celebrated, from being poor to having financial security. But more than the money or the new position, what touched Maria's heart most deeply was the change in how the Harrison family treated her. They now spoke to her with warmth and genuine interest. They asked about her family, her dreams, her opinions. They saw her as a complete person, not just as someone who cleaned their house. The story of Maria's heroic act spread beyond just the hospital and the Harrison household. A local newspaper heard about what happened and published an article with the headline, "Maid Saves Boy's Life in Daring Lamborghini Rescue." The article described Maria's brave actions and the Harrison family's grateful response. People in the community began recognizing Maria when she went shopping or walked through the neighborhood. Some stopped to thank her, telling her she was an inspiration. Others shared their own stories of times when they had to make difficult choices to help someone in need. Maria felt embarrassed by all the attention, but she also felt proud of what she had accomplished. Jacob recovered fully and returned home after a week in the hospital. The first thing he did when he walked through the front door was find Maria and give her a long hug. "You are my hero," he told her simply. "I am going to remember what you did for me for the rest of my life." From that day forward, Jacob treated Maria like family. He asked her to eat meals with the family instead of separately. He introduced her to his friends as the woman who saved my life. He asked about her children and wanted to see pictures of them. The genuine affection between them was clear to everyone who saw them together. Maria eventually decided to accept the position of household manager. She used some of the money to visit her family back home, bringing gifts and showing them that all her hard work and sacrifice had been worth it. Her children were so proud of her, and her elderly mother cried tears of joy when she heard about Maria's bravery. When Maria returned to the mansion after her vacation, she moved into a much larger and more comfortable apartment within the property. She had her own living room, bedroom, and bathroom, with windows that looked out over the beautiful garden. She hired and trained 2 new maids to help with the work, treating them with the kindness and respect she had always wished for herself. The bright yellow Lamborghini remained in the garage, gleaming and perfect. Sometimes Maria would walk past it and remember that terrifying drive through the city. She never drove it again, but she no longer feared it either. To her, the car had become a symbol of how love and courage could overcome any obstacle. Years later, people in the community still talked about the poor maid who stole a millionaire's Lamborghini to save his son, but they did not talk about it as a crime. They talked about it as a story of heroism, sacrifice, and the power of human compassion. They talked about how one woman's brave decision had not only saved a life, but had also changed how an entire family understood what truly mattered in the world. Maria never forgot the lesson she learned that day, that sometimes breaking the rules is necessary when a life hangs in the balance, that courage means acting even when you are terrified, and that true worth is not measured by wealth or position, but by the willingness to help others when they need you most. She carried that lesson with her for the rest of her life, and she made sure to teach it to everyone she met.